Hello beautiful people of YouTube, it is GeoLongPlays here, and today I'm gonna ramble about my personal experience with Dark Souls 2, and we're gonna talk about whether you should play it or not. But before we dive in, let's just get a couple of things out of the way. One, there's gonna be a few spoilers since I'm gonna talk about some of the bosses, some of the areas that you're gonna go through, and some mechanics of the game. However, I'm not a lore expert, so there's not gonna be anything in this regard. And the second thing I think is important for you to know is that this is only my third experience with Souls games. So far, I have only played Demon Souls, Dark Souls Remastered, and I've just recently finished Dark Souls 2. So do not expect me to compare Dark Souls 2 to any other games in the franchise other than the aforementioned. Now with that out of the way, let's jump in. And there's a question that I think I need to answer. Why am I playing Dark Souls 2 in 2025? I'm 31 years old, and when I was younger, I did not own any console whatsoever. I was a PC kid through and through. This franchise wasn't originally on the PC, and even if it was, when I was underage, I was not allowed to play anything related to demons and darkness and magic in my PC. Also, I did not have a TV up until I was 18 years old. Finally, after I had my first TV, then I finally bought my Xbox 360. It was then that I borrowed Dark Souls from a friend for the first time ever. When I first played it, I didn't quite get the game and I didn't understand it very well, and I quickly dropped it. So I only saw the very beginning of Dark Souls 1. Fast forward a few years, all the Souls games have already come out, and I decide to play Dark Souls. But I'm also the type of person who, whenever wants to start a franchise, I never start from the middle of the franchise, and I knew that Demon Souls had come before Dark Souls, which meant that that was the quintessential Souls game. So with that in mind, the first game that I have ever played from the Souls series was Demon Souls, and the full playthrough is here on this very channel. Link in the description as well. After beating Demon Souls here on the channel, I then proceeded to play Dark Souls 1, which introduces new mechanics to the game. The map is extremely well made and everything is super well connected. And honestly, it felt very fresh. It felt very different from Demon Souls for the PS3. And the bosses in Dark Souls 1 in comparison to Demon Souls are way harder. So I definitely felt like Dark Souls 1 was an improvement over Demon Souls. But after I finally beaten Dark Souls 1, it was then time for Dark Souls 2. You should know though that before I started Dark Souls 2, I was actually recommended to skip it completely and play Dark Souls 3 instead, because a lot of people told me that of all the Dark Souls games, this one was the worst. So that leads me to my first impressions and my first problem with the game. First of all, it looks amazing if compared to the other entries, and here's how the beginning went. I met the old ladies in the hut. They dumped a bunch of lore on me and made fun of me for playing the game.
Take a closer look. Who do you think it's supposed to be?
My mom. I was wrong.
Of you.
Is that how... My game just crashed. What's so funny? I accepted my fate, which was to beat Dark Souls 2, and I finally got to Majula, and man, Majula is beautiful. It is still jaw-dropping and arguably one of the best areas in the franchise, at least so far, that I have experienced. Remember, I've only played Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1. It works kind of similarly to Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls 1 and the hub, the Nexus in Demon Souls. However, it is much bigger and with many more NPCs for you to talk to throughout the game. It feels like a safe haven. In fact, it feels like home for some reason. But in contrast with Majula's beauty, I was introduced to the first problem that I would have with the game, which is the map. Even though the places you go are usually very beautiful, actually, there are some questionable decisions in map design. And this often made me feel lost without a clear path to go through, and sometimes it felt like I was playing the game incorrectly. How's the game going? Going super well. I don't know what to do anymore though. Maybe I'll go back to Majula and explore a new area. From the beginning of the game, you can actually fast travel to each and every bonfire that you find, except the primal bonfires, which when you interact with them, they actually take you back to Majula. And this, in fact, sometimes made me even more confused about the map. Oh, we're immediately back. Wait, can I not? Okay, can I not go back? And in order to discover where to go next, I would have to interact with many NPCs and see if they would say a line that would guide me in some way. So yeah, Majula is beautiful, but I also felt kind of lost for the most part of the game, and that was a little problem for me, but it was not the only one. So not long after discovering Majula, I was faced with my second challenge, which would consume most of the souls that I found by killing enemies. And what I'm talking about is leveling up adaptability. Adaptability is a skill from many others that you can choose from, like strength, intelligence, faith, and so many others, but this one in particular, whenever you put a point in it, it increases your agility. And do you know what that means? That means that you get more iframes in very, very basic terms. So whenever you're rolling, the chances of you getting hit by an enemy attack are reduced if your agility is higher. I should focus on adaptability then. The stat that governs your iframes is agility. Get adaptability to 24. It's all that matters. So after learning this from the chat, I chose to spend most of the souls I collected in the beginning of the game trying to take my agility closer to 99 points for me to have the most iframes possible. And I did, which means that whatever hit I actually took was purely a lack of skill. So here goes a tip. If you intend to start the game and you think leveling up in Dark Souls 2 is as simple and as easy as in Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls, well, you should reconsider, because you should definitely be looking into adaptability more. Speaking of skill issue, that brings us to another topic that I want to talk about: the game's difficulty. Is Dark Souls 2 difficult? Well, the answer is yes and no. When I played Dark Souls 1 right after Demon Souls, I could certainly feel that the areas were more difficult, and the bosses in Dark Souls 1 were more difficult compared to Demon Souls, especially because one of the key differences between these two games is that in Demon Souls, bosses usually have just one phase, whereas in Dark Souls 1, bosses tend to have two phases. So when I started Dark Souls 2, I expected the boss fights to be as glorious, if not even more glorious than in Dark Souls 1, but that's when I understood why people might not like Dark Souls 2 so much, especially the boss fights. Some of them are really underwhelming. Don't take me wrong, the boss designs are really great. Dark Souls 2 so far has some of the craziest looking boss I have ever seen, and I really enjoyed their design, but I really wish that the fights were as well designed as their looks. And sometimes, honestly, they're just not. I first tried most of the bosses, and to make my point even stronger, Dark Souls 2 had a few battles that I completely gave up on, not because the fight was difficult and not because the health pool of the boss was extremely insane, but because the fight was bad, just downright horrible. And the two bosses that I decided to absolutely abandon were the Ancient Dragon and the two pets of the king in the DLC. But we're gonna get to the DLC later. Where is the difficulty in Dark Souls 2 then? The difficulty is in the areas that precede the boss. Sometimes the boss fights were extremely easy and underwhelming and fast, but the path to get to the boss, oh my goodness, they were painfully hard sometimes. And to me, for most of the game, that was actually fun. No! No! Oh my gosh, that was so close. You're still here! How? I might die. I might die, sir. Oh my gosh. But man, exploring the areas and finding different enemies, that was kind of cool, to be honest. And to further explain my point about the areas being cool and fun, the Ancient Dragon fight that I mentioned, it's kind of sad because the area before this boss, which is a completely optional boss, by the way, you can finish the game without even fighting him, that area was one of the areas that I enjoyed the most, both visually and because of its gimmick. Basically, you are entering a fort or a castle of sorts, and every level you go, you find a huge dude, a huge warrior, with smaller warriors just like watching you fight the big guy. Are you an NPC? I can't lock on. I can't lock on, and it's not attacking me. Are you not gonna attack me either? You moved weirdly. Oh, look, there. Wow! I died multiple times in this area until I got like kind of sick of fighting the big dudes. I decided to just run past the fights, and that's when I learned the gimmick of the place. Oh, you know what? I'm ignoring the other big dudes though, because they're not gonna follow me, are they? They're definitely not following. Oh! What happened? Oh, I understand the gimmick. I have to defeat them. I have to fight them honorably. Honorable fights only. This is awesome. So that's an example of a very fun area to explore with a fun gimmick. And at the end of that area, a horrible optional boss. I think you could tell that I'm only talking about the base game, and the DLCs are something different. We will get to that. So here's a list of my favorite bosses in the base game, the Pursuer. Oh my, oh, he flies. Don't be greedy. Don't be greedy. Oh, let's go. What the crap? Looking Glass Knight. Looking Glass. Whoa, that's a cool design. Woo. Mitha, the Baneful Queen. Very fun fight, and I didn't activate the gimmick to make the fight easier, so I fought Mitha in this poisonous swamp. The Baneful Queen! Oh, that's such a cool boss design. I'm very poisoned now. Oh my goodness. Whoa, grenade! Fire in the hole! No! Mom, help! Okay. Easy! Dark Lurker. Although the quest to fight the Dark Lurker is really grindy and unnecessarily long, the Dark Lurker fight sits among one of my favorites in the base game. Dark Lurker! Oh, hi. You have 4 arms? A little bit unfair. I have only 2. If my math is correct, now there are 8 arms in this fight against me. That is unfair. So this is everything I have to say about the base game. Regarding the DLCs, I need to say that I'm really glad that I chose to do them in the order that I did, which was the following. Crown of the Sunken King first, Crown of the Ivory King second, Crown of the Old Iron King last. So yeah, I finished the base game, I defeated Nashandra, I defeated Audia, I sat on the throne, row credits. You can still play the game after that. It's different from Dark Souls 1 in this regard, and I really appreciate it. You can actually choose whether you're going to start the New Game Plus or not. And it was time for me to start the first DLC. But I need to let you know, by this point, I had been playing the game for nearly 50 hours. I was starting to feel the exhaustion sinking in, but I still wanted more. And starting the Sunken King DLC gave me that breath of fresh air. So when I saw the map, when I saw the dragon, when I saw the new enemies, I was like, oh my god, I'm excited for this now. And the map design, man, chef's kiss, because it kind of reminded me of Dark Souls 1 map design, and it felt like a new game entirely. And then the bosses in this DLC, man, and I gotta say, these were some of the most epic fights on the channel so far. When I fought the 3 dudes that I will not remember their names with the NPCs that I had summoned, dude, it made for some very cool clips. I'm gonna show you part of this fight. Oh! Nobody warned me that there would be 3. Oh! Man, having NPCs here is fantastic. Oh, look at this. This was huge. No! No! A huge mistake! No! What are you doing here? You haven't defeated my friends? Go back to my friends. Yes, he heard me. That's awesome. One down. Backstab. Yes! Let's go, let's go! Friends! Unite! We shall conquer this day! Ignore me completely. Ignore me. Yes! Take this! And this! And this! And backstab here! Why wasn't it a backstab? Now it is! It was not! He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know who to attack. Let's all drink in celebration. This was epic. Power of friendship, indeed. Friendship, 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 friendship. After that fight, there was Elana, Squalid Queen. Super, super cool fight. It would have been better, however, if there wasn't a gank fight involved when she summons the skeletons with the big dude. I didn't feel like that was fun because I personally dislike gank fights, and you will see why that's gonna be a problem for some of the other DLCs, but we'll get to that. And then after Elana, one of the best dragon bosses in the series so far. Remember, I haven't played the other FromSoft games yet. FromSoft absolutely nailed this DLC. And after I got the crown, it looked really cool on my character. I proceeded to play the Crown of the Ivory King. And now, by this point, I was probably close to 55 hours. So now, definitely, I was playing the game and I really wanted to finish it by this point, which might have hindered my experience a little bit. And I'm going to talk about this in my conclusion. So yeah, Crown of the Ivory King. I really felt that there was a lot of back and forth in this DLC when you're trying to get the knights to fight alongside you with the final boss. It also, this DLC, however, presented me with a very, very cool fight when you fight, I believe it's Ava, the king's pet. Super, super fun fight with some funny moments, with some epicness here and there. But after that, honestly, I did most of the grind that this DLC required off stream because I was just finding the DLC extremely daunting and repetitive because I had to go 1 billion places to find people to fight alongside me because I needed them to close a few portals for the final fight with the final boss of this DLC. I'm not gonna get into much detail here because you need to play it for yourself. However, one thing that I did on stream and that I really disliked was explore the Frigid Outskirts, which is a region in this DLC that you need a key to. And whenever you get this key, you slide down a coffin and get to this area that you can hardly see anything around you because of the storm. And basically, you have to go from point A to point B. And in this point B, you will fight, guess what? Not one big cat, but two. And they have the same moveset as the other cat that you fought, but they're black. And there's two of them. And that meant that was another fight that I decided to skip because it felt unnecessarily unfair, since whenever you died, you would have to go through the area all over again from the very beginning. That was a no-no for me. That would have probably made me play the game for 70 hours until I beat that boss. I did not like that fight. I skipped it. You can think less of me because of that, but I don't. I have my limits. And then it was time for me to fight the Burnt Ivory King, which is the final boss of this specific DLC. And I know that a lot of people like this fight, but I gotta say, for me personally, remember, this is my personal opinion, the gank fight that happens before the final fight, I'm not a fan. I'm just really not a fan of gank fights, especially when these fights either precede or they actually are the boss fight. In this specific case, there is a gank fight that precedes the coming of the Burnt Ivory King, and the introduction of this character is actually really funny because there's a huge fire gate that appears, then there comes Burnt Ivory King, and he's actually really small. Oh, that's actually pretty underwhelming. What a huge portal for such a tiny creature. But the fight is fun, and I first tried that guy, so take that, Burnt Ivory King. Let's go. Okay, don't get greedy now. First try! Let's go! God Gamer! Ooh, it was then time for the last DLC that I had not done yet. The Crown of the Old Iron King. By this point, because the other DLC was extremely long, fatigue had already settled in. I just wanted to finish the game for the sake of finishing the game. Then the DLC started and it presented me with a very cool map, very cool enemies. and a very cool gimmick. The idol thing that appears, that you can destroy the idol and debuff the enemies around that idol. Cool gimmick. Again, cool areas, cool map, cool gimmicks. That's everything I'm looking for in a game. However, I think this experience was a little bit hindered by the fact that I was already kind of exhausted of Dark Souls 2. And I think something that kind of hindered the experience even more in this DLC is that the first boss that you fight is actually a repetition of one of the bosses in the base game, which is the Smelter Demon. I did not like the fight in the base game, and I sure did not like fighting the guy again just because he was blue. I was feeling kind of blue after that fight, but I proceeded exploring the map, and little did I know that I would quickly get to who was actually the final boss of the DLC. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is everything I was looking for in a Dark Souls boss fight. Enter Fume Knight. What a fight. What an amazing moveset. Two very difficult phases. I died a bunch of times to this guy, and I had a lot of fun while doing so, especially because they finally placed a bonfire very intelligently beside the boss room. So whenever you died, you would just take a few steps and you're fighting the boss again. That made the fight extremely fun because there was literally no run back. Chance still. Victory! After defeating the Fume Knight, which was a very tense fight, I was done with the DLC. Yep, I know, there's still Sir Alone. I discovered after the fact. And I fought Sir Alone off stream and I recorded a video. Here's footage of me defeating the guy. And it was time for me to actually wrap up my playthrough of Dark Souls 2, and it is time for me to give you my final thoughts about the game. Remember, this experience is from the perspective of someone who played only Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1. I recently finished Dark Souls 2, and I have not played the others yet, but I will. Here on the channel. And if you want to see that, and if you want to be in the chat for that, please subscribe and activate notifications because Dark Souls 3 is starting very soon. I was expecting the jank of this game that I had been warned about to completely throw me off in multiple occasions. I expected the bosses to feel extremely unfair, and I expected the game to be horrible in many ways, and I have said the word expected multiple times, and I'm sorry for that. However, I was willing to forgive most of the jank, most of the flaws that the game has, and because of that I had a great time for most of the game. It is kind of sad, of course, that the game is unnecessarily long. Mind you, if you're willing to play this game now for the first time, don't start it thinking that you will beat it in the same amount of time that you did beating Dark Souls 1, because I felt the game was twice the size actually, and it can feel kind of daunting sometimes. However, I can definitely see myself, for the surprise of many that I know will watch this video, I can see myself going back to this game in the near future and trying out a different build. So would I recommend you try this game? Yes, I would. I think this game is worth a shot. If you, like me, have heard bad things about Dark Souls 2, it is not a bad game. It is maybe a bad Dark Souls game, but not a bad game per se. What I would do is I would have a second game that I could fall back to whenever I started to feel exhausted, and then I would go back to Dark Souls 2. Maybe, for example, let's say you're playing Hollow Knight, which will happen on the channel as well, by the way, and Dark Souls 2. So play Dark Souls 2 a little bit. Whenever you start feeling exhausted, go back to Hollow Knight, and, you know, go back and forth. If you have two games going on at the same time, I think the Dark Souls 2 experience might be a little bit better. I have never rated a game on the channel. I have never done this before. I don't even know if this review that I'm giving you guys here is even watchable, to be honest. But if I had to rate this game on a scale from 1 to 10, I would give this game a solid 7 because of all the things that I have mentioned before. And I think you guys who have played the game might understand why. Again, I believe my experience would have been better if I had another game that I could fall back to when I started feeling tired. I could have done that. Of course, it is my channel. I could have chosen to do that, but I didn't. I pushed through until the end like a true Dark Souls lord. And maybe when the exhaustion started to sink in, that could have hindered my experience a little bit and made the score drop from like an 8 to a solid 7. But 7 is still good. The game is worth your time. So yeah, there you have it. This is me rambling about a video game. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comment section down below, and also let me know by leaving a like. And if you want to see more videos like this one, please tell me which games you guys would like me to talk about. But what about you? What do you like about Dark Souls 2, and what do you dislike about Dark Souls 2? Let's see if we agree, and maybe if we agree to disagree in the comment section down below. I will see you guys next time. Make sure to click the links in the description for the full VODs, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.